So this morning we have our user experience and accessibility panel, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves, starting from my left, going to my right.
I'm first.
Yes.
All right. I'm Jeffrey Litz. I work at an agency downtown called Highforge, and I am on this panel to represent the red-headed bastard stepchild that is accessibility. That's it. Sorry.
My name is Paul Hershey. I was art director at Riptide. I was lead UX at Code School. I'm director of user experience at BISC. I run Orlando Designer Slack Group. I run Design Orlando Meetup. I'm on the board with AIGA. I'm the president of IXDA Orlando, and I'm a big community advocate, and I do a lot of user experience.
I'm James Tryon. I'm creative director of WG Ballet. I also help one of the co-organizers of WordCamp-Orlando and WordPress-Orlando Meetup.
And I'm your moderator today, David Yarde, co-organizer here with James for WordPress-Orlando, organizer for UX Orlando, and pretty much Batman behind the scenes wherever help needs to be done. All right, so we're going to start today with our first topic of first-time user experience. Each question will kind of be generated initially from our panel, some of the things that we've experienced, and then we will accept a round of questions from the audience, limiting them to responses of 1 minute each. All right, so first-time UX. We're designing an app, we're doing fun things. What's your take on it?
What is my take on it? I do not have. I'm sorry. Talk louder, please. Oh dear. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Excellent. So the first thing I feel that would need to be done, make sure that you're accessible, obviously. Like for the first time, that is where you grab people in, and where you, if you're not accessible, you're kind of just putting up a big wall for people that either are blind or deaf or aren't able to use the mouse very well. Initially, that initial barrier is enough to just turn all of them down and turn all of them away from your website or app or whatever you want to do. I think that's reasonable.
In my experience, and especially in recent years, I work with a lot of established products, and I come in and try to build user experience into them. A lot of times people have a way that they've done things. They've had success with the product already, and I have to go in and kind of influence culture and influence design thinking in the culture. And that can be very difficult for a lot of people. So the way I would approach it, and the way I typically do it, is I'll move in, make sure that C-level people understand what we're doing. I'll basically run a keynote for them and explain what this means and how it works. And then I'll start to build bridges into other departments and see who else is interested in what I'm doing. Communication is key. Make sure everybody understands what you're doing and why you're doing it. And one of the biggest tipping points for user experience in any company, if you work in a company right now and you want to get people involved and excited about it, take something in your product that you know doesn't work correctly and test it against real users. Screencast it and then show it to the higher-ups. They will be shocked at the usability of your product. And then they'll get on board and start to work with you with it.
I'm gonna play the ignorance card. What do you mean by first time UX?
Excellent. So are very many people here familiar with the first time user experience? No? It's kind of like your first date. You go out, person on the other end may be poorly dressed. What are your initial thoughts of that date? How is it going to be? Not very good. Kind of the same thing with first time user experience. Thank you for bringing that question up. So touching on it, and you're pretty familiar with this, we have two parts to the first time user experience. You have the visible aspect, which is kind of your design, and then you have your invisible one. What has been your experience in that, and some things that you see that could definitely be improved along those two areas?
Sure. Well, let's really twist it a little bit. Let's say a client's coming to me for the first time. They've already had a site established. Like, I don't know what's wrong with it. How do we improve this? Well, I can say I'm dealing with a project right now where the site just looks so spammy because the content's good, but they maybe copied and pasted from Word. So everything might be misaligned, or they're throwing a lot of extra things in a copy, or they're losing conversion. So like, what's going on with my site? Why isn't anyone using my site? Then I loaded it to sign up, and like, well, if you look at it, it looks like you're just spamming them. Then you got the ads here, and you left embed clickable image. So if you touch it with your thumb, it now loads to a single image page. So now someone thinks that you're spamming them and you're link baiting them, your site's not usable because you accidentally added too many links or too large of an image on a device. So client has great content. This client has usually good traffic, but just the fact that it's a little bit ugly and they copied and pasted and some bullet points are out of alignment, she's getting a horrible bounce rate. So it's destroying her experience, definitely for someone who's a first-time user. Returning users know what it is. Returning users know that it's a good site, but your first-time users run from it. So maybe that answers a little bit.
So what was the question?
So touching on the two components to the first-time experience, so our visible experience and the invisible.
Okay. So when I think of that, I think of usability and interaction design as more the visible side of things. Things have to be usable. So if you have a form, never put your form labels to the left of the form input fields because the eyes will move in a zigzag pattern and it'll produce more cognitive load and it'll make it harder to fill out the form. So things like that, usability things, Steve Krug does a lot of amazing stuff on usability. If you want to learn more about that, I highly suggest the book, Don't Make Me Think. And then there's the invisible side, and that's more of the usability design side, and then there's the user experience side, which is more the research, understanding who is your user, what are their needs, what are their goals, why do they come to the site, what are they trying to do, what are their concerns, are they primarily going to interact with your product on a mobile device, so is your mobile experience as good as your desktop experience. Understanding and researching who your users are and what their needs are, mixed with good usability, is going to create ultimately a great product.
I don't think I have a whole lot to add to that. You've covered the load very, very well.
Okay.
So, next question, please.
So when it comes to usability, especially for sight impaired, maybe tactile type impaired people, what are some things you recommend always starting out with at the beginning of a project to take these things into account as you're going along with design and development?
That's all you
That's a very good question, first of all. The first thing to consider is really, is it structured in a way that people will understand? Like what James already was saying, if a site is spammy, no one's going to understand what the hell to do unless they already know, like, this thing is spammy, so I need to click this and maybe this, but not this, because this is going to take me somewhere that's not great for me, or that's not something I'm interested in. Furthermore, there are things like contrasts on designs that's really very important. There's a big trend where it's like gray on gray, which is just, if there's one thing you really shouldn't be doing, it's gray on gray. I'm just going to say that right now. Because people that don't see very well are just not going to be able to read any of that. As nice as it might look, it's just not very great for those people. Let's see. Let me think about that.
Sorry. A few things that I might add to that, and that I would use when I'm working on products, is there are plugins that you can use for colorblind. There's 3 different types of colorblind, I believe there are.
Yeah, 3 main ones.
Yeah.
And there's a number of others.
Yeah.
7.
So if you take the 3 main ones, there's a plugin for it, and then you can filter your site based on what things look like for them, and then you can start to see what the colors look like. So being aware of button affordance and making sure that the clicked area on the button is big enough and easy for dexterity issues, and then making sure that your CTAs stand out from your background and from your text, so it's clear what those areas are, the call to actions, is really important from the colorblind aspect. You want to jump back on it?
Sure. So to add to that, I'm sorry. Wow, lost my train of thought there. Sorry, I'm a little nervous when I get them.
Well, I'm just going to continue on what they both said. So, small problem is sometimes a designer wants to make something look amazing, and it can be so beautiful, but it's not usable. Sort of like what Jeff was saying, gray on gray. Another one is like a gold on white with black text, and you start looking at a screen reader, someone colorblind, you have no idea that's a link. So adding little things like maybe an underline, or also italicizing an underline in a link, or changing the color as well, or giving multiple indications that something does something, is better for your users and a more usable experience. To provide the best user experience and sacrifice a little bit of the design aesthetic, but giving a better user experience is going to give you a better conversion rate anyways and a more usable site. So think about that in mind. That's going to help your users a lot. Like they've said, larger buttons. You got to think about it on a phone. How are you using it? How fat is someone's fingers? How big is the device? So just think about that. Simplify it. Make things stand out. Contrast, and you're probably going to see your conversions increase as well, just because it's easier to use.
What has been the biggest challenge in terms of user experience and usability, applying those techniques that you found in the course of your careers?
The biggest challenge for me, and I think most people who do user experience, is buy-in. Convincing people that user experience is relevant and something that they need to be taking into consideration with their product. Most people, they'll find success working in a certain way, and they'll get to a level of success that can keep everything stable, and they're scared to deviate from what they've already done because they know that that's worked in the past. So helping people understand the value of good user experience, helping people understand what that is, understanding who their users are, and making sure that they're adding new features that are relevant and important to their user base is going to be something that's critical for the app to scale or the product to scale.
Yes, and the same can be said for accessibility, which is a very difficult topic for any project, because either you add it in, you don't tell anyone, and you just charge for it, or you try and sell it, and at which point no one's really going to see the value just yet, because they have either no idea what it is, they have no idea what the value is going to be, or they have just, it's extra money that I shouldn't really, or that I don't really want to spend, even though it's very, very important for their website to be accessible and to be inclusive, most of all. And then, second of all, it's fighting, I guess, against standards, because the marketing department wants this pop-up that collects email addresses, but it's not necessarily the most accessible way to do that. Or just design patterns that are just very common, as I've mentioned before, the gray and gray, that are just not accessible, and it's a constant struggle where you're trying to do good, but at the same time, it's people don't want to do it because this is how we've always done it, and this is how we're going to do it this time as well.
Never use modals, never use pop-ups. They're the anti-user experience.
Yeah.
One of the trickiest things we've had a problem with in the past is convincing people to do user testing. They just think that they know what's best and it's their goals, but getting your client to understand, and it's really about just education from the beginning, is it's not so much about you, it's about your users and what your company goals are and accomplishing those, and then working towards that. we want to, I'm not too much about the UX stuff, that's definitely important, but just like testing copy, testing colors, A/B testing some buttons here and there, user testing the experience, like they said. An amazing tool is called Hotjar. You can install it on your site. It's either, I think they got a free account, even a paid account's pretty inexpensive. And you can start just recording people using your site. You can see how they're using it. You can see where they're clicking. Maybe everyone thinks an image should be clickable, or maybe you did something fun or a quote and maybe it looks like a link. Maybe it's causing confusion. So you can see that. You can actually see the people going through the site, clicking through how many pages and where they're leaving. And you can also track where their mouse is going. So I would recommend just spending some time user testing and just watching that, and then tweaking your site to improve usability there. But that's also, again, more conversions too, which isn't necessarily accessible.
No, it's called Hotjar.
Hotjar, HOTJAR.com.
How many people here conduct user tests or are conducting user tests? Okay. So if you're not familiar with the process, there's basically 3 ways to do it. There's contextual, monitored, and unmonitored. And the way that you would run a usability test with a user is set up maybe 5 to 10 tasks that you want them to perform on the product. It could be checking out through the checkout cart, signing up for an email, finding a particular product on the page. Set up all that stuff in advance. In a contextual setting, you'll actually go and meet with that user and sit with them while they perform the test. You'll have a note taker with you, and then you'll document everything that the user says. Don't write down what you think they're thinking or what they're trying to do. Write down the exact quotes that they said. Another thing that you can do is through Skype. If you have a lot of users across the country, you can send out a survey that says, hey, we're looking for testers. We'll pay you $50 if you sit with us for a half an hour while we go through some tasks on the site. And then there's unmonitored, which is the most cost-effective way to do it. And you can use a tool called usertesting.com. You can set up all your tasks on the platform, and then it'll go out and find people specific to your persona, from age, country, knowledge. You can set all kinds of specialty parameters, and they'll find the people that fit your needs, and they'll have them test your product. So user testing is very important, and I'd love to talk to anybody who wants to know more about it.
So it seems like a lot when it comes to dealing with user experience and usability is removing the ego from it, leaving it at the door and taking it from a very abstract, objective kind of view. These are my intentional points. This is what I want to accomplish. So now that we've kind of done our research, we've tackled these pain points, and we're going into a project, we've hit that design layer. How do we keep the user experience and accessibility thought train going in this particular direction?
If someone knows how to keep that train going for accessibility, I would like to know. Because it's very, very difficult to keep people interested in that. Like, for real, you have to keep pushing. Like, oh, this is a bit off. This contrast difference is not good enough. This placement is not good enough. This size is not good enough. You have to keep pushing from content to design to development. You have to keep on it, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah, to work in user experience, it's what my opinions are in design. At this point in my career, I've realized they don't matter. Nothing I think matters. Nothing I want to do matters. I am merely the mouthpiece for the user. My goal is to figure out what the user's needs are and make sure that I can facilitate those needs and give them what they need so that they have a positive experience with the application. And the only way I can do that is through testing. One of the key things you're trying to do when you're designing a product is figure out what that user's mental model is and then create the conceptual model to match it. That's the biggest thing you got to do, and that will create learnability. And once the user understands and can learn the product easily, they're going to quickly adapt to it, they're going to feel comfortable in it, and they're going to use it regularly. So if you're not familiar with the mental model, it's the way someone might think of if you have a store and you're selling surfboards. That person hits the website, they have an idea of what links they think they would click to find those. They have ideas for the way they would check out and the way that experience should work. Even though they never used your site, they've gone through so many patterns on other sites in the past, they have this mental concept of what that should look like. If your conceptual concept is different than that, it's going to create static and confusion. It's it's going to create more learnability, and it's going to add on to the cognitive load of the user. So it's going to be more difficult to use, and it's less likely they're going to check out. So mental models, conceptual models. If you want to learn more about that, there's a book by Indy Young called Mental Models. It's a great book.
So, you're saying that you want to make the web page look like the user is going to, or whoever's going to the site is using it. So would you say like a menu where you would look for, would you go to like Amazon and check out how that looks, or?
I would find, depending if you're working in a niche, I would look at your competitors to figure out who your users. Well, actually, I'll step even further back. I would figure out who your users are, and then I would figure out what products they use. So I try to learn as much about your users as you can, as often as you can. That learning process never ends. You'll always be learning about your users, and always try to understand what products they use. You talk to them. Yeah. Reach out to them. Have a newsletter go out to all your registered users and say, hey, I would love to speak with you. I'll give you a $30 Amazon gift card if I can have a half hour of your time. And then ask them questions like about their life, demographic questions, why they use the site, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, other sites that they use. And it kind of develop an understanding of who these users are. As you do that, you can look at all that data in a spreadsheet and you can start to develop correlation between people, and you can develop personas from that. So you might realize if you have a site and you make custom longboards, you might realize, okay, a lot of people go to, Cocoa Beach Surf Club, a lot of people go to the Ron John website, and these carts have this kind of interaction. So you could kind of say, all right, I know they use those carts, I know that they checked out there and bought stuff. That's part of their mental model. So if you make something similar to it, you know that it's going to be very learnable and it's going to be easy for them to check out on your product.
Yeah, I mean, they said most of it, but I was going to say a little bit about personas, which are awesome. We do that for all of our projects. We interview our client, we talk to them about who they are, we ask them questions like, who's your average user? Then we usually make up some fake personas, outline what they would be doing, how they'd be interacting with the site. We also make user stories for everything we do. So everything that we talk about the goals with the client, but once we get the goals done, the high-level goals, we take it back as a team and start breaking that down. And we'll write everything down. Something as simple as a user, I need to be able to reset my password. And we'll probably make 200 of those, just little one-line little user stories. Everything that we do is data-driven, so it's like user feedback. We're constantly iterating what's going on. And I know David asked about design, but I think actually everything about UX, UI, even accessibility, that's all design. But your average person thinks design is just the pretty. I call the pretty part the lipstick layer, because you've already designed it. You've talked about the goals. You've figured out the user experience through wireframes. Where we work, we define the copy, the goals, the page structures, the hierarchy of the page based off user funnels before we ever even start thinking. We think about colors, but that's before we ever show a client colors on it. So it's a fully functioning experience based off goals and feedback of the user and the client before we ever try to start making things pretty or adding that style on top. And I think that really removes the distractions, and you understand, yes, that works, or no, that doesn't work, or this is confusing. Another thing is convention. As much as we want to push convention as designers sometimes, it's there for a reason. People are starting to get used to that, rely on those things. One little simple thing, though, not everyone will understand what a hamburger menu is. So as that's evolving or changing, you're going to have a significant increase in conversions if you add the word menu next to the hamburger menu. So you're sacrificing a little bit of your design aesthetic, but you're making something way more usable, and everyone's going to be able to understand what that is.
So it sounds like you're using the information architecture to really drive a truly delightful experience when it comes to planning, strategizing, and executing. Awesome. I love that. So one of the things that has always been, I guess, a plague to me, being a developer, being a designer, going through and working with sales and marketing, is aligning everybody together on those same goals. And of course, keeping that, mental mindset all the way through. So you kind of need as well a UX advocate or accessibility advocate that's willing to be the hated one in the room. It's kind of lonely being in user experience where you want to make things flashy, you want to make things awesome, but you really want to make it usable and delightful for them as well. So touching into that, animation when it comes to accessibility and user experience, what are some ways that you've addressed that over the course of time?
Not specifically, but you can use, like, animations is fine, just use it sparingly, please. Don't make it like an animation film, because there's, especially cognitive disabilities are going to have a lot of issue with things moving around the screen everywhere, and just not going to be able to focus properly on what they want to do, and ultimately that's just going to lead to them deserting your website because they just don't understand what's going on. And that doesn't necessarily mean cognitive disabilities by itself. Maybe people that are older that just don't necessarily fully understand how the internet works, but they know how to get around. They may also get confused by what's going on. It's just use it sparingly. That's all I've got to say about animations, really.
Yeah, in the early 2000s, we made these crazy flash sites that were giant animated blobs of nonsense. Let's not do that again. If you're going to use animation, I agree, don't use it unless it makes sense to use it, and only use it to help your user understand that something has worked. So in confirmation or success, maybe you have an input field for like a newsletter, and then you have a sign me up button or something like that. They put in their email, they hit the button, it changes to a loader, it loads, it pushes across, lights up in green and says success, and then closes down. It quickly, that interaction, that animation, let them know and reassured them that, yes, I am signed up for the newsletter. It didn't take them away from the experience to a confirmation page, where then they had to search for their way back. It was in line, and it made sense from the motion what they had accomplished.
We use a lot of progressive enhancements too. So we'll use CSS3 transitions to do things. So if they don't work on an older browser, they just don't work. But if you're not losing anything, the experience of the users is still the same. The only time we use them is on slight hovers. So instead of it just like transitioning, we might maybe transition and maybe make it get bigger by 5%. Just as a slight interaction, the user is aware that they did something. Or let's say, like example with the form, if you didn't put the .com or an @ symbol in your email address, it's okay to make that wiggle a little when it errors, and you turn red or a little alert or a red border saying, hey, your email's messed up. Did you forget an @ sign? Like, you can do that with a little tooltip. That type of animation is useful. I don't think you should have a site that's sliding in or any type of mascot. So let's not have any clippies on our site. Like, that's not going to help you. Or help your users, but small little visual cues are nice and they're satisfying. They know that you did something correct, so your users will like them. But let's not show off.
And to touch on that, browsing around the internet, and I saw this site, and it was pretty new, really, and it had music autoplaying. Yes, and so let's avoid autoplaying music. Users don't like to be startled, especially if they have their volume up loud, they're out in a public place, they may not realize that the volume's on, it can just mean that they're going to close your site and never come back ever again.
The only time that might work is a site like Bandcamp, like a music.
If it's music-centered and people expect to hear music there, then that's okay. But if you're selling, insurance and you start playing, Beethoven's sonata from sometime and it's on full blast, people are going to be like, I'm not sure what's happening and I need to. Just not autoplay.
Yeah, make sure it's
video,
user-initiated.
Yes.
And same thing with accessibility and video. If you have video on your site, give the ability to pause it, even if it's not visible to pause it. But in the accessibility tabbing, giving them the ability to quickly stop that so that they can move through the site is really important. Do you want to add to that?
Not specifically that, but it's when you use video, use subtitles or have like a sub transcription. Sorry, transcription of the video if there's important information in there, so that they can, like, if they use a screen reader, they can just get to that and don't have to bother with the video itself. And to quickly go back for a moment about the animations, it's great, but don't rely on the visual feedback too. So someone that doesn't see your website is not going to see that success message. You have to make sure that you build in techniques that allow a screen reader to also be able to give people that feedback. So, as an example, my yesterday's talk for me was about a function that WordPress now has called 811y.speak. I recommend using it for that kind of thing. It basically just sends a message to the screen reader whenever you use a notification like that, to at least let them know that it also went successful, so that they too know that something happened and what happened and how to continue.
So, mobile user experience. We have smartwatches, we have iPads, we have Wi-Fi in cars. How do we continue this thinking? How do we, prepare for the onslaught of the different devices and experiences that are going to happen? What have you seen? What do you predict?
So I think to kind of look at user experience moving into the future, the concept of UIs is something that's going to start to fade away, and we're going to get more into a Siri-based user experience, where we're going to be focused on the way that we interact with content on any device in any way. I still think that there needs to be, or I guess I should say, a graphical user interface as opposed to a user interface, because users will have to interface with content or products in some way, but there may not be a visual representation of what that is. It may be something like a Siri, or maybe something where you just type into it and it brings back information, because devices are changing. One quick thing for the current state of design is be aware of how phones and smart devices work. A lot of those are designed in a really weird way, where our hands generally can sweep the bottom right corner or bottom left corner, depending on if you're right-handed or left-handed. And we put a lot of interactions at the top of the screen, which causes people to have to move their hand up. And especially a lot of Android users, and this is a 6 Plus, and I have a pretty big hand, like that's my area. So I have to scooch my hand up and do this and possibly drop my phone. So be aware of where you place interaction points on a mobile device. Try and keep them at the bottom, and if you have something in the bottom right or bottom left, make it so that you can click it and it opens up with an array of additional options, because it's going to be faster and easier to use that product. It's going to make it learnable. It's going to just make it better for the user. You're going to retain users longer.
Sounds good. And what I would like to add to that is get rid of the idea of the fold, because it just doesn't exist anymore. There are, at Android alone, there are thousands, literally thousands of screen sizes that you could potentially design for if you really wanted to, but it's insane to do that, and it's just not worth your time. So stop thinking about the fold and just make sure that it works and works well. And as far as accessibility goes, these devices lag behind a little bit. So phones kind of are catching up, but watches, I don't think anyone that's blind or that has any sort of disability that is going to use that watch in the same way. And I don't think at this point you really have to worry about that just yet. Don't hold me on that.
But to what you're saying, beware of the fold. There isn't a fold, that is true, but I've seen it time and time again in testing. If you have a full height header, people, a lot of times, they don't realize that you're supposed to scroll down. Like very clear, obvious sites, very typical patterns in a website. I've seen it over and over again where people will not understand that they need to scroll down to find additional interactions or things like that. So make sure if you use a view height, like a VH100, set it to 80, put an arrow at the bottom that bounces. It might seem like over the top or unnecessary, but it makes a huge difference in usability.
Yeah, that's actually what I was talking about a little bit earlier about how you don't want to focus so much on how pretty something is. You want to make it usable. So just giving that little bit at the bottom or having the top of the next line of text showing up, like people are going to automatically know there's something there. If you really need to do that, have the image load, and then after a second, have a little arrow fade in at the very bottom so you can know that it's there so people will see it. Another thing that I really don't like is when people start removing things from their mobile site because they think that's how it's going to help. It's like, oh, I know what I can do. I can just remove these 5 sections because they're not that important to me. Well, if I'm trying to, let's say I mean, it's happened when you try to find an address or something, and all of a sudden their site's totally different, but you're in a hurry or you're driving, like, I need to get that information. So that's missing, and that's really annoying. I have no issue making sections smaller, removing background images, removing supporting imagery that is just as background, but I don't think removing content on a mobile device is necessarily a good idea. You shouldn't change the total content. I can see you changing the user experience, but don't remove things. If it's important to be on your desktop, it should also be on your phone. And if it's not that important, get rid of it.
So I want to say it was like an iOS device, so just your standard, whatever the most popular view responsive width is. And it depends on the tool that they're using. So to repeat the question for everyone if you didn't hear that, there's a feature that on WordPress.com that you can preview your site on a mobile device, and what is that device that is being used. So it really depends on what they're centering that around in terms of like screen size. They're just probably saying here's how a generic mobile device width is. If you're a lot more developer-minded or kind of curious just to see how it is, Chrome has excellent dev tools. They have a ton of devices that you can check both landscape and portrait, and you can drag it and see, other things in between as well. And that's what I use. I know the guys here probably use it as well to kind of get that done.
I had a question. I just recently got asked to build a crop load of pop-up in Tiger issue, so how have you found that in that?
Wow. Well, yeah, so the question was, he was tasked with a lot of pop-up modals, I guess, to create, and now he's wondering, should I create those or how should I handle that in the organization? I would try to find some research on user or accessibility to show that you're going to make it more difficult for that group of people, and then I would try to user test against it. And the only time I would say would be an appropriate time to use a modal would be for confirmation, which you shouldn't do unless they're making a huge change, like deleting an account. If it's a banking application, if you're transferring money from one account to another, you may want to pop up and ask, like, so if it's a piece of banking software and you want to transfer $100 from your checking to your savings or something like that, and you type 10000, and then you say send it, confirm, say, are you sure you want to do $1,000 to your savings? And then it's a big move, so confirm that. But most small interactions never use confirmation, which means most of the time you should never be using modals. So I would just find some research, put together like a little PDF or something, and talk to them about it, and just let them know, like, hey, we can do this, but we're going to make a crappier product. Is that our goal? No? Okay, let's do it the right way.
The only issue you might run into at that point is that there are also a ton of articles out there that are marketing based that will say it works. It's crappy, but it works. So I mean, you can make modals accessible if you really wanted to. The angle, if they come up with that sort of research, the angle might then become, it's going to take me a lot more time to do this properly. And it's going to cost you a lot more money for me to do this. Which, in a lot of cases, might actually help deter that kind of behavior.
So I think it is important to convey to your stakeholder that if it's not going to work, that you provide a solution as well. You can't say it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work, and here's a solution that will work. And so at least, because sometimes they really don't know what they want. It's your job to.
I think they're doing it just because a lot of people in our space are doing it. And we should do that because we're big and we can. So I just need to find out alternatives, and I think they're on board with it.
Yeah, if you show them some inline confirmation or inline kind of success messaging, I think they'll see that as being really cool and cutting edge, and you could probably sway them towards it. Do you want to answer?
No.
Donald Woman has a few articles about pickaxe.
Yeah.
My rule is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Question. So the question was, what are your thoughts on drop-downs?
It depends on the way you have your IA set up, and it depends on, you have persistent navigation, which is at the top of every page, and that should be at the top of every page. There's a lot of sites where that breaks, even well-known sites. That's a huge usability issue. If you're going to use a drop-down, I would use second-level information in the drop-down, or I would use the persistent navigation at the top, your high-level links, to click into and create local navigation. So if you have a shopping cart and you have, or a site that's e-commerce and you have men's, women's, children's accessories or something, when you click into women's, there should be a landing page for that and then a localized navigation for all the filters and metadata and everything that would be associated with that section.
From bringing it all the way back to the user experience as well, what we've been doing is whenever you go on a parent level page that has children, I usually make a children's menu on the side so they know, like, oh, I can still get back to the top, but while I'm browsing this section, I know that I'm in this section. These are those links. Also on a mobile device, you have the problem with hover. How do you trigger a hover when you're on a phone? So what we've been doing is still allowing that top level menu link to still work because we want it to go to the news section. But on a mobile device, we have a plus symbol, so it's two buttons. You have the main link, and then you have another link on the side. And when you click the plus, it opens up. It shows the submenu. So it's a second action to show that, but it's the same menu, and it's no longer a hover action. It's a separate action to click and show.
And another thing to make sure you take into consideration is search. 40% of all web users are search-dominant users. So creating a search experience that's very effective and useful for your site is absolutely critical to user retention.
I think we have time for one more question.
So our last bit will be performance. How do you approach removing things or keeping your performance budget underneath and not running over? What has been some of your strategies, experiences?
Well, first off, get a good host. If we're talking hosting, I mean, the easiest solution is always just go more randoms on page. So if you have a good host, you're going to have a faster site. As far as performance goes, if your site's loading slow, people are going to leave. So, I mean, a quick solution is check image compression. If you're loading giant images, it's going to be a bad user experience. So, I mean, I don't want to say too much, I'll let the other guys answer it, but check images, good hosts, and you're going to, and queue scripts properly. It's going to save you so much time.
Yeah, that's more a development question, but I would say the same thing. gzip, good hosts, use a CDN, just try to make things fast and the interaction quick for the user.
Agreed. And if you're not sure about what to take away from a page, because I think that's what you were really wanted to know, maybe. As mentioned before, Hotjar is a really good tool to figure out what parts of your website are actually being used, what parts are just skipped, and what's interesting to your user. You can then analyze that and determine, hey, these people, they're just not interested in this block here. For example, a slider. Let's just call those out. Beyond the first image, there's probably not going to be a whole lot of use. So you might as well just get rid of that or implement it.
So
Which by itself is
even
also
in Google, you have in-page analytics, which are very helpful for your decision-making process for your stakeholders, because you'll see it right on the page where they're going, what they're doing, like, really nice.
So we have 2 minutes. Does anyone want like a list rundown of really killer tools that they could be using right now? Okay, I had a feeling. Do you want to start with some tools?
Sure. For accessibility, there's the Wave accessibility toolbar, and there is tenon.io, tenon.io. Those two by itself are going to be very invaluable. Wave will look at the page and determine what can be improved, and it'll just check for basically the automated portion of accessibility testing. Tenon.io will do the same thing, except at a bit more, it's a bit easier to use than Wave, I feel, but they complement each other really.
Okay, usertesting.com, excellent source for unmonitored user testing. It's a good starting point if you've never tested anything before. Survey Gizmo, it's a really good tool to send out surveys to your users to learn more about them. It has real great breakdowns. You can do regression testing against it. Solid tool. Mixpanel, excellent tool for understanding user behavior within your current system. I would hook into Mixpanel using Segment.io. It just hooks into all your JavaScript and all your interaction elements. Use FullStory. FullStory is like a crazy amazing tool that will blow your mind. Trust me, fullstory.com is the address. Intercom. Intercom's another excellent tool that I highly suggest everyone uses. And Google Analytics. Make sure you're using Google Analytics. It's not 100% accurate, so don't really take them for their word, but throw it on there and just get some rough ideas. Mixpanel is going to give you a much better understanding of things. And if you don't like Mixpanel, you can use Kissmetrics, which is alright too. What do you think? Mixpanel, Kissmetrics? Alright.
So I'll throw some in here. For designers, Sketch, if you use the Sketch app, there are a couple plugins that you can use to test out contrast, accessibility, same thing for Photoshop as well. You took Mixpanel, that was on my brain. Intercom, definitely a really great tool. I would say that, check it out. You can talk with your customers and really get a frontline view of what's going on. InVision, yes. Yes, that's a really good one. You can do clickable walkthroughs and things like that to kind of give them an idea of what they're expecting, to get an idea, especially when you're doing user research and user testing, to see what they're really clicking through and doing. And Web Developer Toolbar. That has been a lifesaver time and time again. You can disable JavaScript to see, somebody has JavaScript disabled, how that's likely to function. And a whole host of tools like cookies, so on and so forth. So I definitely use that as well. That's all my mind. That's about it.
Well, everything they said, and I have one more that wasn't listed. I use Browser Stack, which is, I don't remember the price. I think it's like $20 a month right now. You can get a free trial. I think you get free like 10 minutes worth of trial and a charge by the second, so you can use that free trial for a while. But
Is that in browser what?
Browser Stack,
Stack.
yeah, and it lets you. It's a virtual machine. So it's a website that turns on virtual machines. So every browser, every device, every OS that's current, they have. You test all the way down to IE6. Not that I say support it, but you could at least turn on a real machine that's going to tunnel into a real computer somewhere else, and it's not just a fake screenshot. It's a legitimate, Internet Explorer 6 browser you're looking at through your browser. And they load, obviously not for Internet Explorer 6, but they do load as much as the developer tools as they can that are provided for each of the browsers. So you can get a lot of knowledge from that site.
Well, this concludes our UX and usability panel. We thank you all for joining us here today, and thank you for the amazing questions.